It is often easier to smooth over the rough edges of one's convictions than to stand alone in a crowded room. This is the daily tension between the comfort of belonging and the difficult, solitary work of staying true to one's own vision. This internal conflict is the driving force behind one of the most enduring and controversial novels in American literature, a story that dramatizes the violent clash between the creator and the crowd by centering on an architect who chooses to dynamite his own masterpiece rather than surrender his integrity to a committee. It is a fierce, uncompromising parable, and like its author Ayn Rand, not without its blind spots. The philosophy here pushes individualism to its extremes, leaving little room for nuance or the messy interdependence that shapes most human lives. This blink follows this high-stakes narrative, exploring the explosive conflict between a man who refuses to bow and a society that demands he break. The characters represent the best and worst of humanity, and their collisions stage a dramatic trial of ideas that challenges the accepted virtue of self-sacrifice. By the end, it becomes clear why this particular story has represented a rite of passage for champions of radical individualism, and why it continues to provoke as much disagreement as devotion. It is not an ordinary day for architect Howard Roark. Today, he faces expulsion. He stands before the dean of the Stanton Institute of Technology, who holds up Roark's drawings, clean, angular designs that reject the heavy ornamentation of the past. He calls Roark dangerous for refusing to obey architectural tradition. When the dean points to the beauty of the Parthenon, Roark acknowledges it, but won't copy it. A modern building must be true to its own materials, steel, cement, glass, rather than mimicking wood or stone. The dean offers a second chance if Roark will incorporate classical styles. Roark refuses and walks out, choosing the integrity of his own judgment over society's demands. At that same moment, Peter Keating graduates with highest honors from the same institution. Keating is everything Roark is not. He spent his years studying the professors rather than the subjects, giving them exactly what they wanted. He doesn't care about buildings themselves, only the prestige they bring. His valedictorian speech is a masterpiece of platitudes. Keating joins the famous firm of Franklin and Hire in New York, selecting it for its social connections and overlooking its mediocre work. He represents what Rand calls the second-hander, a man whose primary reality is the opinion of others. The two men travel to New York, their paths diverging sharply. Keating enters the marble halls of Franklin and Hire. Roark seeks out Henry Cameron, once the greatest architect in the city, the man who invented the skyscraper, now a drunken outcast destroyed by a public that refused his stark, honest designs. Cameron tries to drive Roark away, warning that society forgives crimes but never forgives independence. Roark stays anyway, learning to master engineering and the brutal cost of holding to one's vision. As the years pass, Keating rises swiftly through flattery, manipulation, and office politics. Yet he remains hollow. When he faces a genuine design challenge, he has nothing to say. Under cover of night, he slips into Roark's rundown apartment, begging for help. Roark designs Keating's projects for him, and Keating signs his own name to them, accepting the awards while hating Roark for the very strength he depends on. Roark eventually opens his own small office, but refuses to compromise his style for popular taste. The breaking point arrives when he wins a commission for a major bank building. The board loves his logical floor plan but demands he add a classical marble front. They call it a small concession. Roark refuses to fake his work and walks away from the money. With no clients left, Roark closes his office, strips off his suit, and takes a job as a day laborer in a granite quarry. He has lost his business, his reputation, his social standing. To the world, he is a failure, while Peter Keating is a celebrated success. Yet as Roark handles the drill, there is no sense of defeat. He is in contact with reality, shaping the earth with his own hands, untouched by the opinions of others. He has chosen the hard truth of the quarry over the soft lie of the drawing room. The dust of the quarry settles, and into that silence walks a woman who will become the mirror of Roark's soul. Dominique Franken is staying at her family's nearby estate when she spots him working in the pit. She's the daughter of Guy Franken, the same man Peter Keating is busy flattering back in New York, but she carries a cold, sharp intelligence that despises everything her father's world represents. When she sees Roark, she doesn't see a laborer. To her, he is a force of nature. Their connection is immediate and violent. She tries to degrade him, hiring him for menial repairs to prove he's beneath her, but he looks at her with a calm clarity that strips away her defenses. When Roark finally comes to her bedroom, it's a collision of two equals who have found the only other person on Earth who actually exists to them. But here's what makes this so agonizing. Dominique loves Roark, and that terrifies her. She looks at the world, run by men like Keating and her father, and believes anything pure is doomed to be crushed. So she decides to crush him first. She thinks that by destroying his career herself, she can drive him away from architecture and spare him the slow torture of rejection. She returns to New York and uses her influence as a columnist to attack his work viciously, all while visiting his bed at night. It's a war waged out of a desperate, twisted sense of protectiveness. Now, while Dominique attacks from tortured passion, a far more dangerous enemy emerges. His name is Ellsworth Toohey. He's a critic, a small, fragile man with a honeyed voice, and he is the intellectual engine behind the rise of mediocrity. Toohey preaches altruism and selflessness, but his true aim is the destruction of the strong. He knows that if he can convince men their own ego is a sin, he can rule them. He promotes Peter Keating constantly, praising his derivative buildings as genius precisely because Keating is hollow and easy to control. Toohey wants a world of Keatings, and he identifies Roark as the ultimate threat. The conflict reaches its peak when Toohey sets a trap. He manipulates a wealthy man named Hopton Stoddard into hiring Roark to build a temple of the human spirit. Roark accepts, seeing a chance to build something that honors human potential at its highest. He creates a masterpiece of light and space, placing a nude statue of Dominique at its center. When the temple is finished, Toohey springs his trap. He convinces Stoddard to sue Roark for malpractice and sacrilege, claiming the building fails as a temple because it doesn't make a person feel humble or small. The trial becomes a public shaming. Experts testify that Roark's work is cruel and arrogant. Roark sits silently through it all, refusing to apologize. The verdict is inevitable. He loses. The court orders the temple disfigured and redesigned by a committee of second-rate architects. For Dominique, this is final proof. She walks through the ruins and sees that society will never tolerate a man like Roark. In a horrifying act of self-punishment, she decides to suffocate her own soul completely. She goes to Peter Keating, the embodiment of everything she loathes, and asks him to marry her. She marries him to prove she has given up, handing herself over to the enemy and leaving Roark alone once again to face a city that has rejected him. It turns out that marrying Peter Keating isn't the bottom of Dominique's fall, but simply a waiting room leading to a much larger cage. Keating enjoys the social status his new wife brings, but he remains a pawn in a game played by stronger men. The strongest of them is Gail Wynand. Wynand represents a third path in this story, the man who tries to rule the crowd by becoming its master. He clawed his way up from the violent slums of Hell's Kitchen to build the city's most influential newspaper empire. He did it by feeding the public exactly what they craved: scandal, vulgarity, and noise. He believes he holds the city in his palm because a single headline can destroy a reputation. The collision between these lives is brutal and transactional. Wynand sees Dominique and decides he must have her. He recognizes a kindred spirit, someone who despises the world as much as he does. So he simply buys her. He offers Keating a massive building commission in exchange for his wife. Keating, true to form, accepts. He sells his wife for a contract, proving there is no floor to his lack of integrity. Dominique goes willingly. She sees Wynand as the ultimate symbol of corruption. A man of immense potential who traded his soul for power. She expects to be crushed by him, which is exactly what she wants. Then the story takes a sharp turn. Wynand decides to build a private home, a fortress to shut out the city he rules. He fires architect after architect until he stumbles upon Howard Roark's work. He expects another compliant servant. Instead, he meets the one man he cannot intimidate. When Roark walks into Wynand's office, the two don't clash, but click instantly. They recognize the same raw strength in each other. They become close friends. And here is the tragic irony. Wynand falls in love with the spirit of the very man his wife loves, completely unaware of their history. The story unfolds on a long voyage aboard Wynand's private yacht. Out on the ocean, away from the printing presses and screaming headlines, something shifts. Wynand watches Roark and sees a man completely at peace. Roark doesn't need an army of reporters to feel significant. He simply exists, self-sufficient. Wynand begins to feel a terrifying hollowness. He realizes his power is an illusion. He spends his days pandering to the lowest instincts of the crowd to keep circulation numbers high. Instead of leading the public, he follows them, terrified they'll abandon him if he stops feeding them what they want. He is a slave to the very people he thinks he conquers. But insight doesn't always bring wisdom. In this case, it brings hubris. Wynand returns to the city determined to use his machinery of influence for something noble. He will be Roark's champion. He commissions Roark to design major commercial buildings, convinced he can force the public to accept greatness. He thinks he can have it both ways, ruling the crowd and serving the truth. He doesn't see that he's setting the stage for disaster. He's trying to mix oil and water, believing his will alone can change reality. He pushes Roark into the spotlight, unknowingly placing his friend directly in the path of the destruction to come. Wynand's dream of forcing the world to accept genius ignores one brutal fact. Mediocrity doesn't reject genius outright. Rather, it dilutes it until it dies. While Wynand plots in his tower, believing he can manipulate public taste, Peter Keating is down in the mud, gasping for air. The golden boy is finished. Years of copying others have left him with nothing of his own, and now that styles have changed, he has no one left to mimic. He's a shell, terrified and sliding into obscurity. But fate offers him one last lifeline, or maybe a trap. He's offered a massive government housing project called Cortlandt Homes, a chance to save his career, but there's a catch. He has to design it, and he has completely forgotten how to do that. So the parasite returns to the host. Keating goes to Roark, just as he did in school, just as he did in the early days of his partnership. He begs Roark to design Cortlandt for him. He expects Roark to refuse or to demand a fortune. Instead, Roark agrees, anonymously letting Keating take all the credit and the fee. Roark agrees because the project itself intrigues him. It's a puzzle of economics and engineering, how to build safe, dignified, beautiful housing for the poor at a cost that makes it possible. He sees a solution clearly in his mind, and he wants that solution to exist in reality. Roark sets one non-negotiable condition. The building must be built exactly as designed. Not a line changed, not a window shifted, not a facade added. The integrity of the design is the only payment he demands. Keating, desperate and relieved, agrees. He swears on his life that he will fight for every inch of the plan. For a moment, it seems to work. The plans are submitted, and even the bureaucrats are stunned by their brilliance, though they think they're praising Keating. But while Roark is away on a summer yacht trip with Wynand, the machinery of the collective begins to turn. The project is handed over to a committee, and here's where one sees the true enemy of the creative mind. It's the committee. Its members look at Roark's clean, functional, logical design and feel uncomfortable. It's too stark, too bold, so they begin to improve it. One consultant thinks the building needs balconies to feel more homey. Another suggests a cornice line to break up the height. A third wants different materials. Bit by bit, they paste cheap ornamentation onto the steel skeleton. They strip the building of its logic and dress it in the rags of tradition. Keating, weak and terrified of losing the commission, says nothing. He watches them butcher the work, breaking his promise to the one man who saved him. When Roark returns to New York, he goes to the site. He stands before Cortlandt Homes. He sees a monstrosity. Everything that made it safe and economic has been sacrificed for bad taste and compromise. Most men would sue. Most men would write angry letters. Roark does neither. To let this building stand is to allow his own mind to be violated. You cannot give a gift to a society that feels entitled to destroy it. He acts with terrifying calm. One night, he tricks the night watchman away from the site. He plants dynamite at strategic structural points. He lights the fuse and walks to a safe distance. He watches as the explosion rips through the night, turning the lie back into rubble. When the police arrive, they find him sitting quietly on a pile of debris, waiting for them. In his mind, he hasn't committed a crime. He's simply taken back what was his. The silence of the rubble does not last long. A scream of public outrage rises, shaking the city to its foundations. One might expect the world to pause and ask why a man would destroy his own creation. Instead, the world, led by Ellsworth Toohey, demands blood. Tuhei whips the public into a frenzy, painting Roark as a dangerous egoist who placed his own pride above the needs of the homeless. And here, the tragedy of Gale Winand reaches its final, brutal conclusion. Winand decides this is the moment he has saved his power for. He orders his newspapers to defend Roark, believing he can turn the tide of public opinion simply because he commands it. What he discovers is the terrifying truth that Roark understood on the boat. A leader who follows the mob has no leverage when he finally tries to lead. Winand's readers do not listen. They revolt. They burn his papers in the streets. His own staff, organized by Tuhei, goes on strike. The city goes dark to him. Faced with the destruction of the empire he spent his life building, Winand breaks. He cannot stand alone. In a moment of utter spiritual suicide, he signs a statement denouncing Roark to end the strike. He saves his newspaper, but he destroys the man he was. When he looks in the mirror, he sees nothing but a reflection of the mob he despised. This betrayal leaves Roark entirely alone in the courtroom. The atmosphere is one of a lynching. When Roark takes a stand, one might expect a desperate plea for mercy or a technical legal defense. What comes instead is one of the most striking declarations of independence in literature. Roark speaks to the jury as a free man explaining the nature of the human soul. He tells them there are only two ways to deal with the world, by the independent judgment of one's own mind or by the second-hand opinion of others. Every great invention, every step of progress came from a single individual who said, I, when the rest of the world said, we. He does not apologize for destroying the building. He claims he had the right to do it because the building was his. The creator's concern is the conquest of nature, while the parasite's concern is the conquest of men. He tells the jury he is a man who does not exist for others and asks that no one exists for him. The speech cuts through the noise of the city, stripping away the guilt that Tuhei and society have tried to weaponize. The jury, composed of ordinary citizens, looks at this man who stands without fear, without guilt, and without need. They realize that to convict him is to convict the best part of themselves. In a verdict that stuns the room, they find him not guilty. The aftermath is swift and silent, like the clearing of a storm. Dominique, having watched Roark stand against the world and win, finally understands that the world cannot destroy him. She leaves Winand and joins Roark, her fear gone. Winand, now a ghost in his own empire, realizes his life has been a waste of energy. He shuts down the newspaper that enslaved him and asks Roark for one final design. The Winand building, a skyscraper that will stand as a monument to the integrity he failed to protect. The story ends in the sky. Howard Roark stands atop the steel framework of the rising Winand building, the tallest structure in the city. The wind beats against him. The ocean stretches out below, but he looks only at his work. There is no one else there. He is the master of the earth, not because he rules other men, but because he has conquered the material world through his own mind. In this Blink to the Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, you've learned that for Rand, the independent ego is the sole source of human progress. The story of Howard Roark contrasts the serenity of the creator with the anxiety of those who live for the approval of others. Society often weaponizes guilt and altruism to control the strong, yet those who stand by their own judgment remain untouchable. By rejecting the demands of the mob and remaining loyal to his own standards, Roark proves that the self-sufficient mind is the only thing that can support life. The lesson at the heart of this book is that one's life and work are sacred values, never to be traded or diluted for the sake of social acceptance. Okay, that's it for this Blink. We hope you enjoyed it. If you can, please take the time to leave us a rating. We always appreciate your feedback. See you in the next Blink.